Just before we go to the grinder, I just wanted to talk about the types of laps that you may use in this process. There are lots of different ways that you can do it, but when I came into the industry, this type of lap here was the choice of preference. This was made by a company called Trifus, Australian-made wheel. Unfortunately, Trifus have stopped making these things. They don't exist anymore. So we've had to go to other options. Fortunately for me, I still have one of these wheels. They're a good option because they are free cutting. The matrix that's actually holding the diamond in place allows this to cut freely. There are some other types of wheels that actually have a bronze type finish. They're a little bit harder and they require more hand pressure to actually grind. So when you're grinding something like this, you would put this on the surface here. I'm not using this horizontally, I'm using it vertically, and you'll see that shortly. But when you're working, you want to put this on here with water, and as the wheel is turning, you move it backwards and forwards. The other options that are available in the marketplace is this. This is a resin bond wheel. This is a Ukrainian wheel. It's actually a very nice wheel. It's a little bit soft, so they're not going to last as long as the sintered metal bond wheel, but very nice wheels, and actually they are more affordable than these ever were. And lastly, we have the standard plated disc, which I think everybody is aware of. They use them in the faceting trade. Quite cheap, readily available, and there's nothing wrong with these either, except that they will wear quite quickly because using a large surface is going to create wear faster. When you're faceting, you're only working in small areas, so expect that this won't last as long. And normally you might have a couple of grades of this. You might have, say, a 240, no, probably a bit too coarse, maybe a 360, and you might go to a 600, depending upon how much glue you have built up in between the opal slices. If you have a lot of glue built up, you need to have a coarser wheel, which would be around about a 360, 320 grit. And what happens is that tends to make a few more scratches, so you want to take them out, and so you will end up going to a finer grade of 600 as well, just to give you that nice fine finish. So now I'm on my Gem Master grinder, and I'm working the same type of wheel that I referenced before. Working with water, you can do this dry, but working wet, I like to see the colour to know when to stop, because it is possible to take too much off. So we'll just start working on this. We work in a circular motion. The surface on this wheel is a 1.5 inch, or say about a 40 mil. So as we apply the pressure, you just make sure you've got a good firm grip of it, and you turn it, you take it off, and you turn it. So you work in a circular motion like this, and you turn it again, and you keep doing this until such time as you determine that you're happy with the intensity of colour, because as you begin to lap down, you'll see colour becoming more intense. Not always in every piece, but you'll see it obvious in others. Now here's an important tip. If your opal is blue, predominantly blue, you don't lap it down as far, because blue doesn't have the intensity of pattern. Red, however, has a lot of compression of pattern in it, and the idea is that we take it down to highlight more of the colour. And as you can see, this is changing. The surface of this piece is in fact changing, because we are in fact going down in the thickness of the material. We can see that since we started, there's a greater intensity of colour here, and also that this here has started to reveal as well. There's obviously not much here. This is intermittent in a broken pattern, but still pretty. This piece here, I'm hoping to take it down a little bit more and expose more intensity of colour, so we'll keep going. Sometimes you have to be patient. And I am working with a mask, even though I am working wet, so it's always my choice that when I'm working with any form of grinding stone or opal, I work with a mask whether it be wet or dry. Just be careful when you're working with a diamond lap and you're working from here. If you don't approach the lap square on, you risk jamming it on the surface, and I have done it just purely through being tired. And if you catch it like this, you cut big grooves in the surface of your stone. So just do your best to be careful. Run your finger or your thumb over the surface of the stone to feel if they're all at the same height now, because when you put the opal on, you may have had some slices that were higher or lower than others. But ultimately, we should have these at a similar height. This is a very beautiful piece here. This is gem quality. There's no doubt about that. And I'll keep going, but it may be necessary to cut this piece out before we finish the rest, because sometimes, as I said, you can lose a lot of that intensity by trying to get the right colour here, and this actually becomes weaker in the process. I've decided that I'm going to use a aluminium oxide dressing stick, the link of which you will find underneath this video. If you're using metal bond wheels like this that have multiple layers of diamond, occasionally you'll need to dress them because the particles can become a little bit dull. This process doesn't really apply to a plated disc, but it applies to resin bond and also metal bond. So if you don't know the difference, have a bit of a look and learn a little bit about these types of surfaces. But this will in fact help the diamond wheel to cut a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, and it may also be a little bit clogged with other particles. So it's just a simple process of plenty of water and just running it in the area that actually does the work, and that's it. We've just cleaned the wheel, and we'll now be able to continue on with lapping this material for triplets. Okay, we're back from the lapping process. These are the two that we started out with, and you can see the noticeable difference that actually lapping your opal can make. Now, of course, if you've lapped your opal very thin to begin with, you have to just be very careful if you just do decide to lap. Here is an example of one that hasn't been lapped, and the reason why I've shown this is that this piece, and this piece are consecutive slices off the triplet slicing machine. So you can see how much difference lapping a piece of opal can make. So I'm sure that if I lap this particular square, the same as I have these, we're going to see this type of colour. This piece here, I'm quite happy with, quite surprised, because when I first started lapping this, there was actually some other dirt in it, and it was only, the colour was only about half of what's visible now there. So that was actually quite a surprise. Now, just one more thing I want to say about the slicing, the slices of opal. If you've got opal with colour on one side, stick that colour down. Don't have it on top, because you will in fact grind it away. So what you want ultimately is to have the colour at the back, So as you're lapping this down, that colour is going to come up. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your lapping. By example, I want to point some things out that do occur during lapping, and it depends a little bit on the type of diamond lap that you're using. You may see here in the viewfinder these lines. Now these lines, they do happen, they do occur. Occasionally your diamond wheel or your diamond lap has a rogue or a coarse diamond crystal that just drags across the surface. And ideally, we should in fact get rid of this because if we don't, sometimes it actually shows up underneath the cap and actually detracts from the look of the stone. So what I'm going to do now is, if you don't have a fine diamond wheel, I'm going to take you through a process of how to eliminate this and just clean this up so that we have a nice clean surface to work with. This is the process that I wanted to share with you that can be used if you've got these types of scratches in the surface of your opal. It can also help you in actually achieving perhaps a slightly better finish if you want to achieve that. What we're looking at here is in fact a piece of glass, a sheet of glass. This is about an 8mm sheet of glass, and what we're going to do is we're just going to put a little bit of 400 grit silicon carbide on the surface of the glass, like that, and then we're just going to spray it with a bit of water, and this now becomes a lapping surface. What's important about making triplets is having surfaces that are in fact flat. Now, I'm working in a figure 8 to try and make sure I've got an even surface, or you can just turn it every now and then if you're doing circles. So the idea of this is that you want a nice flat even surface. If you don't have a nice flat even surface, the integrity of your triplet may be compromised. So this is an option for you if your diamond laps are a little bit coarse. Using this process will in fact help you achieve the right result. So make sure that your grit is a relatively good grit. There are different types of grits in the marketplace that are not particularly evenly graded. If you can get a near 400 grit grading, not a what they call a combined grit, it's preferable for you. So let's have a bit of a look and see how we're going with this process. So now through this process we have been able to remove those scratches, and even through lapping we've in fact highlighted some very nice colour just by going a little bit thinner.